Welcome into the Think Deeper podcast presented by Focus Press. I'm one of your co-hosts, Joe Wilkie, joined as always by Jack Wilkie. Will Harab, I shouldn't say as always, I was not here last week, fellas, so I appreciate you taking it for me and for you graciously inviting me back on the podcast. It's very appreciated.
Yes, welcome back.
You're joined as always by us. We're just not always joined by you.
There you go. There you go. So yeah, no, good to be back. It was a needed break. It was a nice break. Yeah, been a crazy few weeks, I think, as most people are probably aware, and so it was a nice time for a break, but I'm grateful for you guys. You guys did a great job on that podcast.
I got to say that two-man dynamic was interesting. It's sometimes easier with three.
It's a little harder.
Yeah, the two-man.
You guys did it well.
Well, I appreciate it. You always have.
I thought you did it really well. I thought it was back and forth. It was good stuff. We're also aware that tomorrow is 4th of July, and so we want to say happy 4th to everybody, and hope everybody's celebrating with some fireworks, hot dogs, burgers, whatever it is. How do you guys? What are your plans for?
So this is funny. I had a hot take. The gym podcast episode that comes out tomorrow, actually, sneak peek, filmed it with my brother Reese since Joe was out of town. My hot take was I think fireworks are actually a tad overrated. I like fireworks. I think they're cool, but I think they're a bit overrated, to be honest. But
especially in the social media age. Hey, here's a fuzzy picture of like, cool, man. That's great.
What I love about fireworks is you go 10 years, 15 years, and then somebody will finally come out with some cool new firework, and you go, that's amazing, and then it'll be like another 15 years until you see any innovation, and it's like, so in that time, it's
things they're doing.
The drones are really cool.
It's pretty neat. Where they form, words and stuff in the sky with lit up drones, and probably. My in-laws do a big mid-year thing. My father-in-law's birthday is the day after, and so it's kind of a big bash thrown together. So yeah, grilling and fireworks and.
Happy birthday, Wade. Shout out.
There we go.
Nice. Early birthday. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I'm going to be getting back in town, actually. So.
You're back to work, pal.
Yeah, I was going to say I'll be back to work and maybe even doing clients that day. Who knows? But we'll see. Anyway, we wanted to get into a great podcast. Jack, you're the one that started the outline or that wrote the outline. And so go ahead and get us into the topic for today.
Yeah, this is a concept I believe is in Church Reset, the book I wrote a few years ago. We reference every now and then. And I didn't flesh it out much in that book, and so we're going to do that here, because it's also going to lean into this next book we keep talking about that will show up someday. And I call it Choose Your Own Adventure Christianity. You remember, some people remember, some won't. As a kid, they had these books called Choose Your Own Adventure, and it was very interestingly written where it would kind of set up the story, and you could make choices, and it would say, okay, if you choose this, turn to this page. If you choose this, go this way. And so you kind of guided it, and it was set for you, well, how you want this to go. You can kind of shape it in a certain direction or another.
I love those books. They were super interesting.
I see my sister was really into them. Shout out to Rachel, Charles, as some people know her.
So you didn't ever get into them?
No, she was big into them. I remember trying to read one once. I'm like, this is stupid. Just the next page should be the next page, kind of thing. But you could choose your own adventure. It was, the concept of them. And with your Christianity, you think about this is kind of the default structure right now of here's a church building, there's a church here, there's preacher, there's elders, there's leadership or whatever, and you can go in there and whatever degree of involvement you want, it's up to you. You want to show up Sunday mornings and not come back? Well, they're going to encourage you to come back, but, I mean, it's kind of choose your own adventure. That's what you can do. If you want to come in and just get super plugged in and you're in the Bible classes and you're teaching and you're VBS and serving and programs and all that stuff, you can do that. That's all there for you. And they love it when you want to do that. That's what they hope people would do, but if they don't, okay. In extreme cases, you'll have the people that show up once every 3 months, and man, somebody will give them a call. Hey, we're missing you, but what are you going to do? And so very much the church kind of has, and has for a long time, had this choose your own adventure of we want more from you, and if you want to give more, there's always going to be something more for you to do. We'll have that available to you, but you decide exactly how involved you want to be. And this takes some different forms we're going to look at here in a few minutes, but that's the concept we're working on here.
Well, and as you think about what's so interesting about that, think about other aspects or areas of your life where this would not ever be the case. Think about your job, right? Your work environment. How many times is your boss or your employers, the higher ups going to say, you know what, just do whatever you want. You can show up only one day a week or you can show up 5 days a week. It's completely up to you. You can either put in, 10 hours or 40. It's completely up to you. Of course not. Nobody's going to do that. Same thing with your sports teams. If you're a young person, rarely are you going to have, I should say rarely, never are you going to have a coach that's like, if you want to show up to practice, great. If you don't, no problem either. Just show up when you can. Just try to commit as much as you can. No, you're expected as a member of the sports team to show up to practice, to be there for the games, to put in the work, even within your families, right? You've got kids. Most, good, solid Christian families, the parents are going to expect something of the kids. It's not going to be, hey, if you want to participate in family stuff, great. If not, no worries. You can kind of just do your own thing. This doesn't work. This doesn't apply in any other aspect of our lives. But Jack, as you were talking about, a lot of people think that this is how this is how our church life, I guess I should say, should apply. That you can just kind of show up and really do it however you please. Choose your own adventure is the perfect way to put it. And you don't see that in any other aspect of life.
So a preaching school buddy, shout out to Mike Green. In fact, congratulations to Mike Green, Southeast Bible Institute. He's joining that preaching school. Great guy. He was telling me a story once of a church leader told him, well, the Lord's army is a volunteer army, and so we can only get out of people what he give him. He said, Mike was a big army guy himself. He's like, I was in the army. It's a volunteer army. And when you show up, you don't get to just like, no, actually, I don't want to clean that. I don't want to march today. I don't want to, even just because it's a volunteer army doesn't mean we can't tell people their expectations on them.
Right. Not everything is up for debate in a volunteer army. Once you volunteer, you're in that, and there's structure to it. But you see the consequences of something like this, where the guy shows up on Sunday morning only, doesn't live like a Christian, doesn't think like a Christian, doesn't do anything. I'm a Christian. And then you got a guy that is just all into it, right? I mean, he's what we're supposed to be. We're trying to be as Christ-like as possible. We're showing up when the doors are open. We're studying our Bible throughout the week. We're doing Bible studies with people. We're doing whatever it may be. He's a Christian as well. And so it's like, let's choose your own adventure. We're both Christians. Hold on a second. This guy makes a mockery of Christianity, basically, and the world sees that, and this guy is what a Christian's supposed to be, but we're all under the same umbrella, and so you see how this affects us.
Think about what that incentivizes. It's like the students in school who both get an A+, one puts in no work at all, and one puts in a ton of
right.
work. What does that incentivize? Oh, well, if I can be a Christian without really putting in the effort and putting in the work and just kind of show up here and there, again, if you have kind of an outsider looking in, or maybe somebody that's caught in the middle, that's going to incentivize them to go the other direction. Again, just exactly like if the teacher gets up and is like, look, I'm going to give an A+ to everybody, that's going to incentivize everybody to not do the research for the paper and not do the homework. And so that's very dangerous, like you're saying, when you can group everybody under this umbrella of Christian when it's two polar opposite ends of the spectrum.
It's accommodating this individualism that just has absorbed our entire culture. Everything is individual. Everything is to the service of you. If it doesn't serve you, if you don't like it, if a relationship doesn't serve you, if your relationship with your parents doesn't serve you, they're toxic, cut them off. We've talked about that before. If your job doesn't serve you and you just don't feel fulfilled, you don't feel this, that, like all of these, individualism, I got to do me thing, we bring that into the church. And so, well, you don't want to give anymore. You don't want to be here 2 or 3 times. You don't want to get involved with this thing. You don't want to pick up a broom and serve after the fellowship meal. You don't want to. Okay, will we, an indistinguished leadership involved, and that this is where there's crossover with the consumer provider thing, even though it's not the exact same thing, but it's just accommodating your individualism, which. Advertisement plug, and when we get off of this Zoom call, I'm getting on to record Who Let the Dogma Out, our other podcast, or my other podcast with Daniel and Titus, where we're talking about individualism. So if you want to spin off from this, go check that out next week as well. But it's this idea of, man, we can't ever ask somebody to submit themselves to something bigger than themselves. It's about a disconnected, just spread out group of individuals, and we're going to try and give every one of them the experience that they want and let them choose their own adventure.
This is the interesting thing about individualism is I think it's an overcorrection, right? I mean, it's a pendulum swing back from a time where there basically was no autonomy. There was no sense of self. It's like, well, it's for others, for others, for others, for others. It's Jesus, others, yourself. So you never think about yourself. You never think about your own emotions. You don't have time to think about your own emotions because you should just be thinking about other people. Yes and no. What do we see from Christ? He takes care of himself, and from that flows an ability to take care of other people. Same thing with Paul and with everybody else throughout the scriptures is once you get yourself right, it's the same thing in Ephesians 5. Husbands, love your wives as you love yourself. It's this understanding that you should love yourself. And so we go, well, that's just selfish. No, individualism is selfish because it takes what should be shoring up your own relationship with yourself and with God and allowing the love of others to flow out from there. And instead, everything is everybody has to love me and affirm me. What it comes from is nobody actually feels love. It's an individualized because we're trying to fill what only God can fill. And we're trying to be selfish with it, and we're not loving others and not allowing it to emanate from us because our relationship with ourselves actually is horrible. So it's an overcorrection to try to in my opinion, swing the pendulum back from a time where you could never think about yourself, and there's a time and place for that. But once again, from that, and this is where we're going to kind of take off in the episode, when your relationship with yourself is where it should be, from that flows your relationship with everybody else. That's the point of Christianity, is how do you relate to other people? And the consumer Christianity is how does everybody relate to me? That's the exact opposite of how it should be going forward, in my opinion.
What's interesting as I'm sitting here thinking about it, kind of the both ends of the spectrum as far as the generations are very guilty about this. We've talked before about how you take the far end, the older people, right? The older generation. A lot of them kind of come into the church building with my pew. I want to hear my preacher. I want to hear the lessons that I want to hear. I want to sing my songs that I like. And so for the older generation, it's very individualistic. How does the church serve me? How does I didn't really like that sermon. I don't really like this new preacher. It's me. But then you also have the younger generation who's growing up in the society of it's all about them. It's all about, their wants and their needs. And then you've got kind of the middle-aged generation where the church is marketing to them. It's like, we've got these classes for your kids, and these are all the things we can do for you. And so you end up with just a recipe for disaster, really, when you've got all ages, all generations coming to the table with this individualistic mindset. How can the church serve me? Again, the older generation's worried about their pews and their this, that, and the other. The younger generation coming in with, if it's not about me, I'd much rather go to the social club down the road or whatever, or a church that is going to make it about me. And then again, the middle age that is more worried about their kids' classes or what programs it can offer for them. And so again, it's no surprise that when you've got a me-centered mindset that stretches across all generations, why we end up with Christians who adopt this choose your own adventure mindset is because in their mind it is all about them, and it has been all about them, since they started going to church there.
Right. And one of the other problems that flows from this is it starts with low expectations. It just lowers the bar of, man, like all we need out of you is membership and just bare minimum. And if you want more, it's there for more. But we meet people, and I really think a lot, or if not all of the deep thinkers that we, the listeners who come across this and are searching for more, we meet Christians everywhere who just want more, are starving for more. And they're the most involved people in their churches. They're there, they attend everything, they serve in everything, they're part of everything, and they're just burnt out because they have to do everything. Or they're just looking for, hey, is anybody else in this? Is anybody else excited about the work of the Lord, or is it just me? And that's why you have people finding like-minded Christians across the country at lectureships and online, Facebook groups and things like that of like, man, doesn't anybody else care about this? Well, you incentivize people to not care about it, as you're kind of saying, and you just end up with this lowest common denominator, very shallow unity because we're not actually on the same team working toward the same thing together. You've just got those, to use your analogy of everybody gets the same reward. The guy that rides the bench, the guy that shows up with the wrong shoes on, the guy that doesn't want to be a part of it at all, but okay, everybody's kind of, well, do what you want. Well, the people who really want more, and you think about, who should you be incentivizing? Who should you be really feeding towards? And that doesn't mean you leave the stragglers and be like, we don't care about you.
The ones that are passionate
workers. But you should be incentivizing them. Yeah, and so you want to incentivize, like, hey, this is what we want out of membership. This is what is good. This is what we're going to praise. This is what we're pushing you towards, is this. So other people will see that and go, yeah, if that's what I want to be a part of here, that's what I'm going to do. Rather than, well, if we do that, some people might leave, and we don't want anybody to leave, so we will starve the stronger people to death in order to accommodate the people who aren't going to be here anyway. Why do we do this?
Well, what frustrates me, it's the old 80-20 or 90-10 split, right? Where it's, well, 10% do 90% or do, 90% of the work or whatever it may be, right? And the small minority is going to take care of the church. Jack, you've written on this a lot about consumerism and such. Shame on the elders and for the church leaders for allowing that to happen, because we work these people to death. Again, it's a choose your own adventure. Well, they just happened to turn to the page where they're hard workers. Good for them. Some other people didn't turn to that page. It's like, no, you are allowing this person to get burnt out to the point. How many of these people end up either leaving the church or leaving that church and going somewhere else? Like, they get burnt out. They get tired. Man, I put in my time. For a decade, I did every bulletin board at the church. I was there every single time. I ran every potluck. I did all these things. And even if they do get acknowledged, it's not enough to just go, hey, brother, we really appreciate you doing it. It's enough to go, it's not fair that you're having to do everything. Now, if you're the deacon over something, I understand. Yeah, there's church structure, whatever. I'm not talking about that. It is horrible that church leadership will get on this, this one person and just, hey, you're the guy, you're the guy, you're the guy, you're the guy. You're burning them out because you won't expect anything from anyone else, and you're allowing this choose your own adventure. And because some people didn't flip to the page where they're supposed to work for Christ, I guess that's okay. Like, this is, again, and I think we're maybe jumping ahead in the outline, but this is a problem of church leadership not expecting more, to your point.
Well, and this
Jack.
is not all about the hard workers and the ones who are passionate looking around going, well, why aren't I getting congratulated? Why aren't I getting a pat on the back? That's not exactly what we're talking about
Right.
here. But you think
Right.
about how much easier, I guess, it is for those who are working hard, those who are passionate, to keep that passion and to keep that zeal if they look around them and a whole lot of other people are doing that as well. Right, you think about a really tough task, maybe a tough assignment, I don't know, group project or whatever it is, and those who you're working on it with, man, if they are really striving for it, if they're talking about it, and you guys are invested together, it's easier to push towards that very, very difficult goal. On the other hand, if you look around and you're like, well, I'm really the only one putting in the work here. I'm really the only one that's excited about this. Guess what? Your excitement's going to dwindle. Your passion's going to dwindle. It's not about getting the pat on the back. It's not about, well, why aren't I getting congratulated? It's about, we're all supposed to be striving together for this. And when I look around and I don't see very many people who are, who have my back on this, who are right there with me on the front lines, well, I'm going to retreat off of the front lines a little bit then.
I thought that's exactly when you said the front lines. That's perfect, because my visualization, as you were talking about, is Uriah.
Yeah.
Right. You run up and this guy runs into battle. We're ready. And this guy, guys,
Where's everybody at?
Looking over his shoulder, like, where is everybody? And they're kind of like, see you, man. And that doesn't bode well for people. We want to know we're part of something that's bigger than ourselves. Jack, you referenced this earlier. We want to be part of the same mind. And I think the hard workers genuinely do want other people. Most people aren't like, I just want the star power, right? I just want to show that I'm amazing. I think most people would love to have every member in the church be on that same page, because there's something so special about it. You see this in the military. You see this on sports teams, like, Will, what you were talking about, where everybody's surrounded by one goal, and you don't have a bunch of, showboats and doing their own thing. Those teams don't win. The teams where they're really coming together, and even the guy that's on the bench for most of the game, but he comes off for 2 minutes, man, he plays a part.
I
and
can
he's just
see
as excited
you're
as
just
everybody
dying
else.
to reference the Nuggets there. I can see it. You're just dying to reference them.
I was picturing
Thanks
it
for
in my
bringing
mind.
that up for us.
Absolutely.
While we're on
I was
the
going to say,
subject.
national champion, it's
Okay.
so that's what happens when you're an amazing team like the Nuggets, and when you have an amazing leader like Nikola Anyway, but yeah, that's exactly what happens is, okay, you don't always have the guy that is, and this is the different church leadership, an elder's worthy of double honor, no doubt. There's things like that. That's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about the average guy being just as excited about it and bringing that passion in. Jack, I want you to move us kind of into the next part of the outline, though. And specifically, I think we kind of fleshed some of this out. You may have a little bit more to say on the difference from consumerism as we were talking about it, because we're referencing a lot of things, as you talked about. They kind of go hand in hand. Some of the stuff you wrote in Church Reset. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Well, this just flows from consumer Christianity. So we're talking about something very related, but not the exact same thing. I think consumer Christianity is a lot broader thing, but this is the church involvement wing of consumer Christianity, right? It's, okay, well, you're a church customer. We're here to serve you. We're here to give you whatever you want and make you feel however you want to feel or whatever it is. And so when it comes to get involved with the church, okay, this is how we're going to handle that. And we're not going to really expect anything from you. We're going to lay out, just kind of generally. And it's really the kind of thing, in fact, I use the illustration in the book of with a newborn, we didn't bring our kids home, set them on the couch, and be like, all right, if you get hungry, there's food in the fridge. That's what you're doing here with your church involvement, is like, well, if you want it, it's here. People don't know. You've got to go tell them, hey, you've got to get involved here. We expect something of you, and so here's how you do X, Y, and Z. And so, like I said, it flows from consumer Christianity, and it takes a bunch of different forms. So let's get into this part of it. And we've referenced a few times the sporadic attendance. Everywhere you go, every church you're part of, I think everybody has this experience of, like, you look over one Sunday, and it's like, oh, the Smiths, the Williams, the Browns, the Jones, sorry, generic names, whatever. Some family, sorry if that's anybody in real life, but they're here. We haven't seen them in 2 or 3 months. And you think that's neat. And you go, I'm going to go encourage them. Man, sure good to see you guys. And maybe they come back the next week, and then they're gone for another 3 weeks. And you just kind of throw up your hands and go, well,
what can you do?
What can you do? There might be a visit, there might be a couple calls like, hey, we're missing you. And they come back again, and you come back again. In fact, I was just told at one point, well, you're just always going to have people like that. You're going to have people that want to do that. That's the problem. It's kind of the same if, to use the idea of raising kids and feeding kids and nourishing kids. Well, you're just always going to have kids that don't eat their vegetables. You're the parent. Like that, you can't just let that happen. And so that's one of the forms it takes, is just the bare minimum. Just the people that don't plug in, don't want to come. They're not going to come to Bible class. They won't be caught dead at a church event. There's some people that, very faithfully, they're going to be there Sunday morning. And I'm not talking about limited people. You always have to give the disclaimer. We're not talking about Sister So-and-so who's 97 years old and somehow miraculously getting herself in the door on Sunday morning. We're not criticizing her for not being there on Wednesday night. Just in case that comes up. We're talking about the people that could be there, and you just know. And man, Sunday morning, they're going to be there, and that's all you're getting out of them. So that's one of the forms it takes. Let's talk about some of the other ones we see.
You've got kind of you've got your event calendar, and they will choose to show up for the fun ones, or maybe the ones where there's a free meal involved. And for this one, I do want to say, like, I sympathize with the people who look at it and it's like, man, the church calendar is so busy. There's so many things on the calendar. There's so many things that we could do. I can't hit all of them, so I'm going to hit these. Again, I get the mindset of, well, we can't do everything. So that's why I would tend to recommend for congregations to maybe not quite fill up the calendar quite as much, because that way, when you do get together, whether it's a fellowship event, whether it's an evangelistic event, whether it's a Bible study event, when you put that out there, it's more special, I guess. The what I think of is, going always back to sports. Why is it that people don't watch baseball near as much? Well, because there's 82 games, 162 games, and yet the NFL is king, and there's only 16 games because the demand is there more. And so I draw kind of a parallel there with the events. But you have those people who, if there's not a meal involved, I'm probably not going to be there. If it's not something I want to do, I think I'm going to pass on that, And so that would be another form that it takes. I'll show up for the fun events. I'll show up for the meal events. I'll show up again when it's the adventure that I want to choose, when it's the page that I want to turn to. Those are the things I'm going to show up for. No regard to, is this something that's going to benefit my family? Is this something that I'm going to get to be with my church family, etc.? It's more of a, how does this please me?
But on the flip side of that, I would say elders and church leaders put a ton on the calendar for that specific purpose. They try to fill it up, and they try to do enough fun activities for those people
Right.
that they go, I know we're not going to get them for any serious activity. If we actually are going to do door knocking, like, there's not a chance they're going to show up, but we really want their involvement. We want them to know there's a place for them there, so we're going to have a laser tag night or whatever it is, right? Where it's just going to be a ton of fun, and so we know we're going to get them there. Why do we put up with that? So we load our church calendar with enough fun events in there where we know we're going to get on this meal night or whatever else. But anytime there's a work day where we're going to go over and mow Sister So-and-so's lawn and do all this stuff, we're probably
You're only
going
to
get
get the diligent workers on that one, not everybody else.
Right, and it goes back to your point, Will, of think about practice. Well, Coach, I'm not showing up for practice, but I'll show up for the game. So if you want to just put me in on fourth quarter big minutes.
We're talking about practice. Practice. We're talking about practice. Sorry,
Okay.
some people get that reference,
Okay.
some people won't.
Yeah.
Look up the answer, you'll find it. So we had a lady at a church I went to where this literally happened. I'm not kidding. Look up, very sporadic attendee, and so I remember a couple of times it happened, looking up and seeing her and going, "Oh, I didn't realize there was a potluck today." She literally.
Oh, man.
That was, I mean, on the church, and you would look, and it's today. And like that's just how she operated. Like she was there for that. On the other hand, in the same church, we had a guy in church leadership who it was they had fellowship groups, that because it was a bigger church, and this group meets this week, this group meets this week, whatever else. And it was his group's week, and one of the elders asked him, "Hey, you're running your group this week, right?" And he goes, "Oh no, I don't do potlucks. Like I'm not gonna stay for a fellowship meal. Like." You know what? It's probably not going to be the greatest meal you ever had. You can probably get something better. You go down to Red Lobster or whatever, but like...
That's not the point.
You're probably
it's not the point at all. And again, it's the individualism thing. I don't do that. I don't want to eat that food. I don't want to go, do any of that stuff. And also, it's, the cleanup and the sweeping the kitchen and the taking the trash out. No, that's not for me. I guess you're just not going to spend any time with your fellow Christians then. I mean, like... And so it is that choose your own adventure thing, and it's one of those words like you'd almost give more credit and credibility toward it if the person was having people in his house every week, if things like that, or that lady that only showed up once every month for the potluck Sunday, not great, but like if she was involved in all the service stuff or whatever, no, it's people choose what they want to do, right? And so that is certainly another form of it is, picking and choosing what you like, but even very involved Christians can just have a sour taste in their mouth towards certain things the church does, and they're like, I'm not supporting that. I'm not part of that. I'm not, and I don't mean things you have a doctrinal disagreement. I don't know that we should be doing this. That's a whole different thing. If your conscience isn't really with something the church is doing, that's fine to abstain from that. But just things where you're like, yeah, that's not my thing. That's not, I'm not really interested in the Bible study Devo nights, but I'll be there for the service project, the evangelism, the soup kitchen kind of thing, or the vice versa. Well, you put on a Bible study, I'm there, but, mowing yards, I'm not. And so, but then, again, you have this culture where everybody's picking and choosing, so there's little overlap, there's little, we're in this together, it's individualistic.
Hence the choose your own adventure.
Right.
Whatever suits me, whatever I think is best, whatever, fits mine. And so to that point, I think as you're talking, like the forms that it takes, we're talking the sporadic attendance, we're talking the only showing up for fun events, refusing to support other people's initiatives, somebody else really needs you there or whatever, and things like the potluck, right? I mean, it's, the church puts these initiatives on, and, well, I just can't be bothered. I don't do potlucks. Those are the forms that I think it would take. It's interesting as you look at Luke 9:57 through 62, there's these people that come to Jesus, right? And yeah, Jesus, I'll follow you. But, first let me go bury my father. He's it seems historically maybe he wasn't dead, but whatever, that's a different discussion. Well, Jesus, I would follow you, but I need to go say bye to my family first. I would follow you, but. And this kind of seems to speak to this very idea of like, there's always something holding us back from really going all in on Christ. From all of these people. And what does Jesus say? Basically, see ya, right? Instead of, I'll wait on you. That's to choose your own adventure. Well, Jesus, I'll follow you.
Not fit for the kingdom. I mean, that is such a big phrase.
Right. That's so heavy, but that's them trying to choose their own adventure. Jesus, let me first tell my family bye. I'm going to do it on my own terms, and then I'll come follow you. And Jesus just pleads for them. Yeah, I'll wait for you no matter what. No, he says you're not fit for the kingdom. Now we have a ton of elderships and a ton of church leadership says, hey, take your time, do whatever you need. You need to be gone for the next 3 weeks to go say bye to your family and then come back. I guess you can. You're not fit for the kingdom is what Jesus says. That is heavy, but we don't really look at it this way. We look at it as, again, man, we'd rather have their attendance. Showing up some is better than not at all. What if Jesus had that attitude with those people? At least you're kind of following me. I mean, we'll wait on you.
Well, 5 chapters later, in Luke 14, you get the parable of the Great Supper, which is it parallels very, very nicely there when he's preparing this. A certain man is preparing this great supper, this big feast, and he invites all these people, but they basically say, "I've got this stuff I have to do." All the excuses. I bought a piece of ground that I must go see to it. Can you excuse me? I've bought 5 pieces of oxen. I've taken a wife, and so. What is the end of the parable when he says all these people, he says, go invite the ones who actually will come. And then he says, for none of those who are invited will taste my supper. Same thing you're talking about there with not being fit for the kingdom. If your response to Jesus is, I've got this going on right now, I'll come back to it later. Maybe when it's more convenient for me to go to that meal. Maybe when I don't have this X, Y, and Z going on. And again, what does he say? None of those who are invited are going to taste my feast. None of those who are invited are going to taste my supper. They're not fit for the kingdom. And we've been drilling the church leadership thing this entire time. It's later on in the outline, but I'll go ahead and bring it up again here. That started because of, like Joe, you were talking about, the mindset of many, and it's not just church leaders, it's not just the elders, but they're the ones that are responsible for setting the tone. It's everybody who thinks the bare minimum bar for being a Christian is showing up every now and then. And you're a member of this church if you show up every now and then. And if that's the bar that we're going to set, and again, when they come back, we're all excited. Oh man, it's so great to see you. Hope you can be back as soon as possible versus, hey, what's going on? What's going to stop you from being here next week type of thing? What's going to stop you from being at the Bible study event this Tuesday night? And again, everybody always jumps to, well, you can't really bind that they have to be there on Tuesday night for the study or even Wednesday night for the church gathering. You can't really bind that. And, we've lost where's the attitude of, I want to be with my church family. I want to be involved in as many spiritual things as possible. That's I shouldn't say never, oftentimes not the bar that is set by elderships. That's often not the bar that's set by church leaders. It's more of again, hey, you don't want to be there? No problem. Hopefully we'll see you in a week or two. That's what's got to change, is the expectations.
Well, and you see these interactions with Jesus. At no point did he go, oh man, these people might, if I keep my expectations the same, they might leave. And so, what can you give me? Okay, you're going to go bury your father? Okay, well, just catch up with us later. He doesn't do that. John 6, where the people are like, whoa, that's pretty extreme. You're the bread of life and your flesh and your blood. Oh, well, guys, don't leave. I don't, don't worry about that. I don't have to have the parable of the dinner that you referenced there in Luke 14. In none of these does Jesus go, well, let's negotiate a little bit. The rich young ruler, okay, how about, what if I had you sell half of your stuff? The guy goes away sad, and Jesus says, well, that's how it is. Some people just aren't cut out for this. They're not fit for the kingdom. But churches do that. Okay, well, what can we get from you? And you think about, like, putting a value on something. I'm going to self-plagiarize here. I wrote an article using this illustration recently of, let's say you say, I want to join the local country club. And you go and they say, all right, it's $500. You can't wear jeans. You've got to be dressed, a certain nice level when you're in the clubhouse. You've got to keep your locker clean. You've got, some requirements, and it's $500 a month. And you go, okay, no thanks, but thanks for the information. And they chase you out to the parking lot. Wait. What if we made it $250? No thanks. Well, I tell you what if we let you wear jeans, okay? We won't, use the dress code on you, whatever, or we won't make you clean your locker. No thanks. Well, $100, what, $20, what is it? What would you think of that place?
Must not be worth.
You think I don't want to be? Yeah, like you're with every concession, you're going, yeah, this ain't that big a deal. And maybe they talk you down to the point where, okay, $20 a month, sure, I'll do it. I'll come play golf for $20 a month. Sure, what a deal. And then they come back to you, 3 months later, and they're like, all right, now we're going to need some, there's some complaints in the clubhouse. You're not really giving enough. You're coming in dressed like a slob. So you've got them right where you want them. They're so desperate to have you. Why would you do anything they're telling you have to do? So when you have a church member, and it's kind of this thing, whatever you want to give, we'll take it. We're just comfortable with that. We're not going to put a price on it. We're not going to be exclusive at all. They have the same attitude towards the church, right? That I'm in control of this relationship. No, they're not. There is a king involved here. He's involved. He's in control of the relationship, and he sets the price. And you see where he set the price, which is way up here, and then where we set the price, which is, man, whatever you can give, that's not how it works.
Was it Matthew 13? Matthew 13, with all the parables of the kingdom.
Kingdom
Talks about the buried treasure, right? A man who has, he buys the field and he finds this treasure, and it's like, this is the greatest thing ever. And instead of having a church full of those people, if you were in awe of what you had, and if you were willing to sell everything to buy this piece of property for the kingdom. But to your point, Jack, it's almost like we take that treasure, and while they're passing by, we're like throwing it at them, like, hey, pay attention to this, pay attention. No, there's got to be this, to the individual point, there's got to be an individual buy-in where you recognize this is different than anything else. And when there is that, you go, what's demanded of me? What does it take to get this? And if I have to sell everything, I'm going to do it. We're full of a bunch of people that didn't have to do anything. We lowered the bar. I think that's a great point. But why did we do it? Well, yeah, church leadership, we could point to that. I'll tell you, in my opinion, the biggest incentive for this, or the reason why this has been the case, yes, I'm picking on elderships today. There's a lot of great elderships. Love the elders out there. But hey, anytime you make a man's livelihood, specifically preachers' lives, dependent upon that number on the board of how many people showed up on Sunday rather than the spiritual growth of the congregation, you've messed up. You messed up, because what that does is it incentivizes every preacher across America to just say, get them in the doors. We need as many people here on
Get
Sunday.
that number
because,
to go up.
Did you happen to see we had 150 people here today, and last week we had 130? Doesn't matter that next week it's going to be 132. But hey, it's we're leveling up and we're getting all these people. And then, well, this family left from another congregation, and this family left from another guys, we're growing. Not really. We're just, they're church hopping. Now we're full of a bunch of people that have church hopped and are kind of disgruntled, and there's not a whole lot of cohesiveness together, and we're not really growing spiritually, but boy, those numbers are looking good. And we made a guy's entire livelihood dependent upon whether he can get people in the door, and then we wonder why the expectations aren't high. He's terrified that they might leave, because if he asks a family to step up and he starts preaching some hard sermons about, hey, we need you to start teaching some Bible classes, we need you to start doing this, we need you to start doing that. If he's saying those things, and these people take offense and they leave, his job's on the line. He might get fired. The numbers are going down. Now we have less contribution. I mean, what are we going to do? So the way church has been structured is we are incentivizing people to not ask for. We're incentivizing choose your own Christian or choose your own adventure, because again, a guy's entire livelihood, his family's life is dependent upon him getting people in the door. That's a horrible structure. That's why I would advocate way more for tent makers. Don't have your money tied to the congregation you preach for, because it doesn't, then you can say basically whatever you need to say in calling people to step up. But I kind of digress on that. Either way, kind of moving on in the outline though. One of the things you put in here, Jack, and I love it, is that idea of like, imagine we're priesthood, right? I mean, 1 Peter 2:9. We're priesthood. What would have happened if you look at the Old Testament, if, some of the priests showed up some of the time, they didn't show up some of the time, and God's asking for them to come into the tabernacle.
Sacrifices. I don't like blood.
That's right. Hey, I'll do the whole table of showbread, because I love I love food. But some of this other stuff, the sacrifices or having to cleanse yourself. I mean,
It's not really my thing.
the bloody water is just kind of disgusting, and it's just not my thing. And making sacrifice for the people. Did you see what this guy did? He's a jerk. I'm not sacrificing for his family. I mean, imagine if the priesthood did that. What do you think God would do? Well, I don't know. Seeing as Uzzah touched the Ark of the Covenant, was struck dead, maybe there'd be some serious consequences to that.
I was going to say, we've got plenty of text of what God would do when the priesthood decided they're not going to do their job right. I mean, that happens. That they devolved into that, and it did not go well, and he was not pleased.
Here we are as a priesthood, and we kind of think the same thing. We don't take ourselves seriously. That's the point. We have a lot of Christians who don't take it as, in my opinion, don't take it as seriously as the job demands, because we didn't tell them up front. To your point, Jack, it's like at a job interview. You come in, they think they're being hired to flip burgers, and they come in. It's like, oh, by the way, we kind of need you to be a manager. And it's like, whoa, I didn't know I was expected to this.
We kind of need you to do profit and loss statements, right?
Yeah, exactly. We don't stick them in that immediately. We train them as they go, but if they don't know that your job is to be trained into these positions, like from day one, we're training you up so you can disciple others. This 1 Timothy 2 or 2 Timothy 2:2, where it's going to be this continual thing. If that was the expectation from day one and we really started, it's like, all right, let's do it. We start with the expectation that you can come in and get whatever you want, and then we try to slowly turn up the heat and expect them to come with us, and they don't.
So let's talk about for just a second what the mindset should be. And I have to shout out Jack for that country club illustration. I heard somebody say one time Francis Chan is the king of illustrations. I think Jack Wilkie's the king of illustrations. That was perfect. I love that.
I appreciate it.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff.
But what the mindset should be, because we've talked now for 40 minutes about what the mindset unfortunately is for a lot of people. What should it be? We've got a couple things down. Philippians 2 obviously comes to mind as you consider, and I'll just read the first couple verses of Philippians 2. It's stuff all of you deep thinkers, all you listeners are familiar with, but this is the mindset that we should have. Therefore, if there is any consolation in Christ, if any comfort of love, if any fellowship of the Spirit, if any affection and mercy, fulfill my joy by being like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. And then he, of course, goes into how Christ had this mindset of humbling himself and obviously came down in the form of a man to die on the cross. And so what the mindset should be is this heart of service, this heart of deference to others. And what gets me about this is it's so commonsensical. You think about, I mean, just imagine in your head for just a second, whatever congregation that you attend, if every single person showed up, every single service, every single event, every single fellowship event, and their mindset was not, well, what am I going to get out of it? How does this benefit me? But instead, their mindset was, how can I contribute to the Lord's church? How can I serve somebody else today? How can we make this church better? If every single member thought that way, what could the church do? And the answer is that the sky's the limit for what your congregation could do if that was everybody's mindset. And yet it's not. And so again, just think about whether you're an elder, whether you're a preacher, whether you're just a member, think about how phenomenal that would be. And so that's the type of mindset, the ideal mindset that we want to get everybody to scripturally, the biblically mature mindset, because that is the true recipe for church growth. You think about Ephesians 4, where Paul is writing about, every joint supplies, and it leads to growth, the edifying of the body in love, because all these people are contributing these things. That's what we're trying to get to, but we're never going to get there until we have this mindset of, again, and it's not that, you can never be the one that's being served, or you can never go in and have other people emotionally support you, but you need to have this mindset of looking out for other people's interests, looking out for the body's interest rather than just your own. And man, you can just daydream about what the church could be, what your congregation could be if everybody had that mindset. Again, the sky's the limit for that. You guys have anything to add to that?
I was, I don't know, Jack, if you had anything to add to it, and we can move on to the next point, but I was going to bring in Titus real fast, because I was sitting in a Bible class recently, and they were discussing Titus, and it just kind of hit me as we were going how everything, and this is to your point, Will, everything in Titus, I'm going to preach on this, actually, everything in Titus is about others. Paul's ministry was about others in 1 through 2. Titus' ministry was about others in the work of the church in 1 verse 5. Elders' ministry was about others in 1 verse 9. Older women's ministry was about others in 2 verse 4. Titus' conduct was about others in 2, 6 through 8. Slaves and how they worked was about others in 2, 9 through 10. Christian conduct is about others in 3, 1 through 3. Christ's life was about others in 3, 4 through 7. So I know it's a lot of references, but the whole point is throughout the book of Titus, everybody's job was about someone else. It's not, well, Titus, you take care of yourself and just make sure that you're doing okay, buddy. Just want to make sure that you're healthy. No, Titus, I'm calling on you, man. Your job is to establish elderships in these churches and to really establish the churches themselves. Finish what remains, right? The elders, your job is to exhort and to rebuke some of these other people to make sure, because these sinners are affecting whole families. Everybody affects other people, and that's the point of Titus, and why it's so important to make sure we don't have this idea that, well, my Christianity is about me. No, it's not. The entire book of Titus is basically, your Christianity is about how you affect other people. Even the way slaves work is for them to affect their masters to say, that's a Christian. Like, everything is about other people, but we take the individualistic view. Philippians 2 is the perfect one, perfect passage to say, the heart that we carry into the church and that we carry around with other people says everything about us. And if it's all me, thank God Christ was not that way. Truly, thank God, because when you see what he was willing to do and humble himself, not considering equality with God a thing to be grasped, man, if he had the individualistic mindset of just, well, what about me? What about my rights? What about all this? This isn't fair. He could have called 10,000 angels, and he didn't. So we know all this. We're preaching to the choir. People know this. The question is, why don't we do it? Right? Why do we read this or hear these things on Sunday and go, yeah, that's a good sermon, brother. Good sermon. And then we go live out our days for the rest of the week. It's because this isn't coming face to face with us. It's not really hitting our hearts. We know it intellectually. It's not really hitting our hearts. We got to do a better job of that. Romans 12 has also, Jack, I don't know if you want to get into that one.
Yeah, I mean, it just starts, we use the priesthood illustration. It talks about living as or being a living and holy sacrifice unto God, right? That you've been transformed by the renewing of your mind, but he immediately goes into the same thing of considering others more important than yourselves and deferring to one another. And everyone's got gifts, everyone's got something to bring to the table, and we need to realize we need each other and part of this and encourage each other in that. And so very similar language to some of the things in Philippians, Romans 12:10, give preference to one another in honor. Again, put each other first. Serve the people around you, not lagging behind in diligent, fervent spirit, serving the Lord. Contributing to the needs of the saints in verse 13. Practicing hospitality. Everyone's expected to just be part of this. And when you read Philippians 2, when you read this, and where he starts off with this, we've all got different gifts to bring to the table, and so you better use it. Right? Verse 7, or at the end of verse 6, according to the proportion of his faith, if service in his serving, he who teaches in his teaching, he who exhorts in his exhortation, he who gives with liberality, he who leads with diligence, he who shows mercy with cheerfulness. All of those things do something. And we've talked about before, it's always, I've got the gift of encouragement. Like, you better be doing lots of encouragement, phone calls, visits, sending cards, things like that, because that's great. You better be using it. It's not just showing up and being nice to people on Sunday. And so, what do you bring to the table? And do it. Bring it to the table. As part of a team, we've used that illustration throughout this. I've said this before. I've been on teams where I was the top scorer. I've been on teams where I barely got any playing time. You have a role in those teams. Even when you're the guy that barely has any playing time at practice, you got to work hard to make the better players on your team better. You got to really challenge them so they're challenged at game time. You've got to be encouraging maybe. When you're not getting out there and getting to play as much, you got to be the guy that's opening the door on the bench and man, really building up your guys and all that stuff. You've got to do something. And so it's very easy. You're not the preacher. You're not the teacher. You're not anything else. So, well, I'll show up and I'll have my worship and I'll sing and I'll be nice to people. I'll encourage people in that way. Now, what do you bring to the table and then do it? That's how you live sacrificially as a living holy sacrifice. That's how you put others before yourself. But man, this individualism thing is, how does this serve me? What do I get out of this? How does this fit with my identity, my personality, this person, this profile of myself I'm building up? It's not about you. All of this it's not about you. It's about what you can do for others in the context of the church. And so, 1 Corinthians 12, the body parts illustration Paul uses, there's no part we don't need. Ephesians 4, what every joint supplies. All of these things flow from this attitude in Romans 12 and Philippians 2 of, you're not the most important thing here. But when we treat people like they are, and we're so desperate for their attendance that we'll let them get away with anything, they learn to think of themselves as the most important thing.
So I think where we have to wrap is, how do we deal with this? How do we confront this? Because, as we've already said, a lot of our listeners, I'm sure, are the ones that are passionate and the ones that are working. And they're the ones that are trying to come to the table with serving others. And so you look at it, and we even had this question before, Jack, with your scriptural focus videos of, okay, what do you do about the Christians who are not doing their part, who are just kind of showing up, and as we talked about, they're choosing their own adventure, and their adventure just so happens to be the one where they don't really do anything. What do we do about that as the passionate workers, as the ones who are, again, bringing stuff to the table? And we've got a long list here that we'll hit, I guess, fairly quickly. The one that I would say that I'm going to start with is have them in your home. You be the change. You be the one that inspire. Hey, maybe it is somebody who is only over, or who is only in service twice a month. You invite them over to your house for dinner. It can be very tempting and very easy, and I fell in this one when I was at Decatur, that I would go eat, or I would have people over that I really enjoyed hanging out with. Right, they were the ones that just really enjoyed the conversation with, and we really just enjoyed being with them. And usually those were the ones that were showing up often and working very hard. And so the ones that didn't, those would get neglected. And so that's where I would start. If you're looking at this in your congregation, you're like, yeah, we got a lot of people that are just kind of showing up here and there, not really putting in the work. Bring those people into your house. Have them over for a Bible study, for just a dinner get-together type of thing, where that's the first step in really making them feel like family. And then hopefully, obviously, as that continues, you are bringing them into a situation where it's like, oh, okay, so this is what it looks like. This is how we can bear one another's burdens. This is how we can support each other, versus as we have talked about 100+ times, the, hey, how's it going in the hallway? Oh, I'm doing good. Oh, cool. Hopefully see you next week. And that be the end of it. Bring these people into your homes. Bring these people into the outside the four walls of the church building. Make them feel not that you're going to cater to them, but that, hey, we want you a part of this. But if you're going to be a part of this, this is what we need. And so, if you're just, again, your average member in your congregation, not a preacher, not a church, not a part of church leadership, man, start there. Have them over. Joe and Alyssa, when they first came to Jackson Temple, they didn't really know anybody. It was very. Joe took the preaching job, and he had met obviously a lot of them, but didn't really know anybody on deep level. What's the first thing that you guys did? You set up your house every Tuesday night and invited everybody over. Said, hey, we're going to provide a meal. Let's just get together and not even necessarily have a Devo, but talk Bible, just talk and get to know each other. That's where it's got to start, again. And a lot of us already have the advantage of knowing our congregation and knowing, okay, who do we need to reach out to? Start there is what I would say. Have them in your home. What else you guys have to add for this?
I think you get at something there. This isn't on our outline, so I'm going to step out of it for just a second. There's a difference between people who don't know and need to be taught, and people who know better and aren't. And so those approaches are different. And I think we should always start with people just don't know, because you think about somebody could have become a Christian 20 years ago, and if leadership structure was not in place to say, hey, here's some expectations on you. We expect you to be there. We expect you to find a role. We expect you to be a part. We expect you to grow. Here's how we're going to help you do that, and that whole structure that leads into that. If they never had that, even though they've been there 20 years, you need to start on building that foundation with them. On the other hand, there are people who know, and their attitude is just horrible. I ain't doing that. I don't do potlucks, that kind of thing. Those people need to be rebuked. And I think that's when you look at Timothy and Titus, that there is reprove, rebuke, exhort. Those are all different forms for different times. It's knowing the situation. That rebuke is, dude, that's wrong, and you can't do that. Reprove is, man, you're kind of on the wrong path here. Let's straighten that out a bit. And exhort is, man, all right, let's go a little bit more. Keep going. You're doing good. Let's take the next step. And so you need to discern where somebody is on that. And so to your point, Will, about just the having people over or whatever, you're going to kind of get a sense of where somebody is. Of, do they know anything? Do they know that it's even expected that they're going to be there? Do they know, why we do Sunday night and Wednesday night? Do they know what happens in those events? And sometimes you run into people who are just like, oh, I just thought that was another thing you were doing, that was might be over my head, or I wouldn't be able to be a part of, or I didn't think it was that big of a deal. Well, it is that big of a deal, and so you bring them along, and then the other people who are like, oh, I just don't want to, then you get into the next thing. And this is where, we've said it throughout the whole episode, eldership is such a big deal. That where you have an eldership, this is your job, that everybody knows their role, their expectations. And this is what good managers do, what good coaches do, what good, leaders of any type do, is when somebody comes into the organization, into the military, into the team, whatever it is, to sit them down and say, here's what we expect out of you. Here's what we need to get from you to succeed. And if you, try and run over people and do it your own way, it's not going to work. If you don't bring something to the table, we're going to have a problem here. Here's what we need from you. Where does that happen? I think I've referenced before, somebody gave me, a family member actually gave me a manual they were given when they were baptized into the Baptist church as a teenager, and later they came out of the Baptist church. But it was kind of, hey, here's your membership manual. Here's some of the beliefs we hold. Here's what we do. Here's some things like that. And so it started on day one of like, here's what it means to be a member of this church. Do people know that? If they don't know that, we need to make sure they do know that. And so literally maybe even having a handout, or if somebody places membership, if they're baptized, there needs to be elders, preachers, somebody, church leadership in their house the next week to say, all right, here's the next step. Here's what we expect. Here's where you are. Let's chart a course for you to be involved in this church. Does that happen? Where does that happen? And it does sometimes, but it has to happen more.
Sorry, real quick, Joe, then I'll hand it back to you. We've kind of hinted at this. I can't remember if we said it or not. This is what people actually want. People want structure. They want to be
so true.
They want to be told what is expected of them. On the surface, the choose your own adventure Christianity might sound great. Hey, I can just show up and choose whatever I want. But deep down, people want to know what is expected of them. People want to know what's expected of them from leadership, from God's word. And so, people might be listening to this going, man, you start doing that, have the handout or say what's expected, that's going to run some people off. And yes, it will for a few, for the ones that weren't really invested in it in the first place. But for the ones that are, for the ones that truly have adopted the mindset of Christ and want to follow Christ and want to be Christ-like, that's not going to turn them away. That's not going to be something where they're like, no thanks, I'm good, I'd rather not. For the ones that are truly searching, the ones that truly want to be Christ-like, when you go to them and say, this is what's expected of you from this congregation according to God's word, they're going to eat that up. That is going to be something that and even if that you have something maybe on there that they disagree with, it's going to open up study. It's going to open up discussion about, okay, why do we do things this way? Why is this something that's expected? I think we have this in our head of it's just going to run everybody off. No, it's not. This is what people truly want. It's what they truly need.
Well, it's the gentle parenting of the church, right? That's really what it is you look at it and, well, I can't really expect that of my kids. The expectations are low. We just need to think about their feelings and such. Studies have proven time and time and time again, a kid who has set expectations, to your point, Will, is happier. A kid who has the boundaries, set boundaries of like, hey, if you go outside of this, you're getting spanked. that kid is way happier than the kid who has no boundaries and runs all over the place. But this is what we do in the church is we allow them to run all over the place, and then we're shocked that they're not super happy with the church. People need boundaries. They're called babes in Christ for a reason. We like to think, oh no, don't treat them like kids. That's patronizing or whatever else. It's like when they're new in Christ, they are kids. They don't know these things, and any good parent is going to be able to place expectations on their kid and know that's what's best for them. They may not always like it. There may be times where kid pushes back. That's normal. That's what's going to happen in a church. That's where the leadership has to step in. And Jack, as you're talking about with the good elderships, I think it's important too. The way that we typically look to fix this is by preaching, right? Boy, if we just have those sermons from the pulpit, this will really help people get involved. I'm not against it. I'm probably going to be preaching on that this weekend. But I think preaching is limited for that reason to what we're talking about. This is an individual relationship thing. Because how many times do you sit in the pew and go, boy, I hope so-and-so's listening, and it's like, it's stepping right on my toes, but I'm too busy thinking about whoever else should be listening to this sermon. We don't always take it super well when somebody says that, or we go, boy, yeah, could you imagine if somebody wasn't plugged in, and meanwhile we haven't been to church and through, you know what I mean? Like,
or even to the degree that there's not next steps.
That's
like,
true.
Yeah, we need to give more. We need to be more committed. Okay, what does that look like? It's going to look different for everybody in the room, and so it's so hard to do that from the pulpit.
From the family point of view, I mean, imagine if you had the family patriarchy or whatever, like the patriarch, the grandpa or whatever, and he kind of gives a speech to the family every now and then. We need to be nicer as a family. Okay, cool. All right, sounds good. And then we all go our separate ways. Like, we don't know what that means. If a family was to operate that way, what happens is you get into these little confrontations. And in those moments, there's times of learning. As you're going, you're learning these things. That's the importance of the individual, as you guys are both hitting on really well. Having them in the homes and taking them aside and maybe doing what we need to. And the discipleship process, that is a personal family aspect. And we all know families are a lot tighter when they're talking and having this in common rather than just getting the lectures. The lectures don't help. It's as we're going.
Well, and this is what discipleship is, right? It's not just baptizing them and, okay, good luck. Hope it all works out well. No, it's the third step of the Great Commission, or the third aspect, I guess, of the Great Commission. It's teaching. What if Jesus had called his 12 apostles and then said, all right, cool, you're following me. Now just, kind of watch and learn type of thing. Of course, they did watch and learn from, but no, he taught them. He invested in them. He showed them, the ways of the kingdom, and he taught them, versus what we do with a lot of people, which is we rush them to the waters of baptism and, oh, awesome, they're baptized, cool, we're good. And then we miss that last aspect of the Great Commission. And we talked about this before as well, but that's what discipleship is you teach them what it means to be a Christian. And obviously that is what gets them into the waters of baptism, but it doesn't stop there. This is how you live the rest of your life. This is what your week to week looks like. This is what your family should look like. This is what your discipline with your kids should look like. This is what, again, fill in the blank, should look like according to God's word and what being a Christian means. We can't skip that step. And again, I think so often we do. We rush everybody to get baptized, and of course baptism is essential. We should, but we can't stop there. We have to have that third aspect of the Great Commission, which is to teach them this is how you live your life. And to your point, Joe, yes, and Jack as well, preaching, that's a good start, but that can't be it. That for a church leader, that can't be all. This is where the conversations in each other's homes, this is where the outside of the four walls of the church building Bible studies have to take place, and reaching your congregation with, again, just the higher expectations of this is what's expected. This is what being a Christian means. Again, going back to the first century, they didn't baptize those 3,000 in Acts 2 and say, cool, good luck being a Christian for the rest of the week. They were in each other's homes. They were talking about these things. This was a family unit where it was discipleship. It was not, awesome, you guys are baptized. We'll talk to you guys here in a week on the next first day of the week. I guarantee you that's not what it was. And so, yes, the church leadership has to set these expectations, but if you're listening to this and you're not a member of church leadership, again, do what you can do to disciple others, to look at other people and kind of bring them along in the faith.
All right, we're running out of time, but I want to put a question to you guys before we get out of here. Let's say a church, and some churches do this, and I think it's brilliant, where they have a Bible reading plan, where they have devotional books that they distribute to everyone and say, all right, this is what we're doing together. We're reading, so we're in the text at the same time, and that makes conversation so much easier, right? We're all in Matthew 7 this week or something like that. So if a new member comes or somebody's baptized and you say, this is what we do here, here's your reading list, and this is what we expect you. We expect you to keep up with this with daily devotions of reading and prayer. And, we expect your attendance, and just kind of set some baseline things. And then from there, you can kind of build them more into the work or whatever. That is great, and I love that churches provide that, but it's still choose your own adventure. What happens if somebody doesn't do it? So, to put some meat on the bone, some practical, if a church does lay that out, and you just kind of have people who are like, yeah, not for me. I'm not reading my Bible daily. I'm not
really a big
the
Bible
daily
study
prayer
person.
and devotional
Right.
thing. That's not a big Bible study person. Or I'm just really busy. I mean, I knocked out all 8 seasons of The Office, last week, but I just real busy for the Bible study thing, that kind of thing. Should elders do something about that? Or, because this is where the rubber meets the road, is if there's really no recourse of, man, we expect you to be studying your Bible, and if you're not, well, boy, we really think you should. Like, is there any teeth to this, or is it choose your own adventure? Because it remains choose your own adventure if it is. And so, what do you do in that situation? I'm going to put you guys
Jack.
on the spot there, and while I think of my own
think
answer.
No, I got
Go
an
ahead,
answer.
Joe. You go.
Go for it.
I was going to say, I mean, I always hate the idea of putting myself in the shoes of an elder because I obviously don't meet the qualifications yet. But for the purpose of this thought exercise, I think that's where the reprove and rebuke, mindset has to come in. And whether that, that's going to have to take an interesting form as far as, like, again, you can't treat it cavalierly. You have to go to them and say, hey, we really believe this is serious, and we really believe this is something that every Christian should be doing. So let's talk about it. Why did you not get to it this week? Or, what's going to help you get to it next week? And I think a lot of times what happens is something like this. Maybe the elders follow up one time, say with church attendance or something. They follow up one time, hey, what's going to get you back? And then they never follow up again. And the family just kind of falls into the same pattern of showing up every now and then here and there. I think the same thing applies to this, whereas if you as an eldership or you as a church leader go to them one time about the Bible reading or whatever, and they, brush it off, some excuse or whatever, and you never go back to them, well, what have you just told them in your mind? Oh, okay, your excuse is legitimate. That's what you've told them. And so I think what I would do if I was an elder or part of a church leadership structure, be persistent with them every single week. Hey, why not? What's going on here? And then I got to say, if it's something where they're repeatedly not doing what's expected of them, I don't know. Do you get into the church discipline thing? That's where it gets tough. But again, I think those who are truly searching, those who truly want to be Christ-like, when you're persistent with it and when you're continually telling them this is what is expected of you, the ones that deep down don't want to do that are going to run them. They're going to weed themselves out, I guess I should say, versus the ones that truly are searching. They're going to say, okay, yeah, that is important. Let me do a better job about that next week. And then they do. And then you continue to follow up with them. That would be the key to me. Persistent. Follow up, continue to try to start the conversation. Oh, you didn't do your reading this week. What if I did it with you? What if we got together and did it, over coffee or something like that? And you just do everything that you can. And if they're at the end of the day, they're not doing it, I don't know. Do we enact church discipline? Joe, what do you have? I'm sure you have an answer here.
I think it's a fantastic answer. It does lead to that next question, but it's a great answer. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, no, I was thinking the same thing of, that would be the 2-part, that would be the one part of, I do think that it's right for the elders to go, hey, we've noticed that you've been struggling with your reading. What's going on? I think that's fine. I think that's very good. The other part, I would say, I'm a big fan of the idea of, like, when you come together for a Bible class. All right, guys, we've been discussing this week. What'd you find? What was in it? What was in the reading that you thought was very helpful? And as you go around and you get everybody's answers, it's going to become very evident who did not, and that's going to become very awkward week after week when it's like, I got nothing. I didn't do the reading. I didn't see anything. And it's like, man, everybody else did, and you're the guy
this
sitting
is where you
there.
get to incentivizing and rewarding the people who are achieving.
Right.
That thing we talked about.
That's exactly it. Like, and it kind of, there's a shame element almost, this guilt element that comes into, like, man, I really got to get to that, because you don't want to be the guy week after week after week after week who's not doing it. It's like everybody's showing up to the gym and getting ripped except you, and you keep showing up, and everybody's like, and you just looking scrawny, and you start looking around.
Because you leave after 10 minutes, of being at the gym. You don't stick around.
Yeah. That's exactly it. You don't actually put the work in. And so that becomes very evident, and it becomes this kind of guilty thing. And so I think establishing some sort of church structure where that's the case, where it almost, they weed themselves out. It's a culture of, hey, we've got this together, and you recognize I'm not part of this culture. You'll either leave, which is, in my opinion, kind of getting rid of the chaff. That sounds mean, but if they're not going to do it,
or
then
they'll
okay.
step up to the plate,
or they step their game up. Exactly. Those are the only two options. If they continue to sit there, then you have the question of, all right, man, like, where's the shame? Where's that element of week after week you're okay with being the one guy that has nothing to say? That's not okay either. So that's a lot easier to call out. I feel like most people are going to get the hint and go, oh, man, I probably should do something. That would be my answer. Jack, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Like a cultural pressure, a good peer pressure kind of thing is a good element of it. And somebody's gonna rush in with you can't bind that. Spare me. This is what elders are for. This is, and we talked about, Will and I last week at the end of Titus 2, where Paul gives him a list of things: teach the younger men, teach the older women, teach the younger men, older men. Like teach this, teach this, teach this, teach them to do this, to avoid worldliness, all this. And where he says, let no one disregard you or let no one despise you. Basically, like make sure they do it. Yeah, like stay on top of them that they do this. That authority is vested in the church leadership to say, hey, in this household, this is how we're going to grow. We as the elders have decided this is how it's going to be. It's nothing extreme. We're not saying every guy has to prepare a sermon every month. We're not saying anything difficult. We're saying you need to be spending time with God, and if you're not, we need to sort that out. And so as far as like drawing them up on church discipline, I'm not sure it raises to that so much as it is getting that sense of when it is reprove, rebuke, exhort, and really just keeping the pressure on. And like you said, we live in this culture where people will fold under the pressure to either do it or go, I don't want to be a place where I'm, I don't want to do it. And if this is going to be the kind of place where I'm expected to do it, no thanks. And you know what? We're so desperately scared. We're so desperate for numbers once again that, man, we just can't have somebody leave. No, you're better off if somebody who doesn't want to spend any time with God leaves your church. That is a sad thing, but man, go back to all those interactions we looked at with Jesus. Luke 9, the rich young ruler, the people turned away at the parable of the dinner. It was, if you're not fit for the kingdom, go home. Because then you have a church full of people who are fit for the kingdom, and you can get something done with that, rather than catering to the least common denominator. So, a little bit of an interesting thought experiment there. We are not elders. We are very thankful for elders in that job who are doing that. But yeah, you do have that permission to really chase this stuff out and to enforce and to make sure that the church is going the right direction and meeting the expectations placed on them. Put reasonable expectations on people, but then call them to meet them.
That's what I was going to say.
Anything else?
Is that you can't force anybody into spirituality. You can't force anybody into wanting to spend time with God or force anybody into wanting to study their Bible. You can't do that. What you can do is raise the expectations and say, no, this is what's expected of you. And like you said, and like we've talked about, follow up with them and be persistent about it. Again, you're not going to force them. You're not going to physically force them into it, but you do have the authority and the right to raise those expectations and to say, this is what's expected of you according to God's word. And are you actually doing it? That's where the line, I think, is. Again, you can't, tie them up and make them read their Bible. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is creating a culture, fostering an atmosphere where everybody knows this is what's expected in this congregation. This is what's expected of the members. This is what's expected week to week, day to day, even with Bible study. And like Joe was talking about with Bible class, you come to the table, the Bible classroom every Sunday morning, every Wednesday night, whatever, you have something to contribute. And until I don't want to end here. Somebody else better have something to say because this is going to sound very pessimistic. If we don't have elderships and church leaders where we start doing this and raising the expectations, guess what? We're never going to have stronger congregations. We're never going to grow spiritually together. We're never going to be able to effectively reach the lost, really, because we're going to have a bunch of half-hearted soldiers, a bunch of guys and women that are just kind of barely into it, sitting on the fence, 1 foot in the world, 1 foot in the church. So until we have church leaderships and structures of preachers and elders that actually set these expectations, we're going to have shallow growth, shallow unity, and it's just going to be a negative outlook for the church.
I want you to think about Gideon. That's what I would say is the optimistic side here. You will lose people, no doubt. You will. When you raise expectations, you will have people that are no longer comfortable, and your numbers may dwindle. But I'll tell you what. Think about Gideon. God goes, all right, we got 10,000. No, we don't need that. Okay, 5,000. Okay, 2,000, 1,000. Gets down to 300 men against a 100,000 army. God, how in the world can we do it? 300 committed men.
Numbers are accurate, but just in case anyone's
whatever.
It was 32,000, 10,000, 300.
Yeah, there you go. I know.
Will,
I'm saying it's what I was gonna say. Good for you, Will. That's good. I'm going off the top of my head. I'm making up the numbers. The whole point is he's whittling it down, right? And he whittles down to 300, and you go, how in the world can 300 people do it? Yeah, it's 300 committed people who are willing to do what God asks them to do. That can change the world. So you look at your church and you go, wow, we went from 100 and now we're down to 50. Yeah, but those 50 people care. Those 50 people want to be here, and that can change the world. God can use any number to do amazing things, but what he can't use is half-hearted people, and that's why Jesus said, see ya, you're not fit for the kingdom. So be willing to have that attitude there. But fellas, where I was going to wrap up here, Jack, do you got...
I'm just going to say, God gets the glory for that. Whereas when, let's do whatever gets the most numbers in the door, we get the glory for that. You have the Andy Stanley, the megachurch, the cult of personality stuff. God doesn't get the glory for that. But if the number gets smaller and God can work through dedicated people, he gets the glory because it's about him. So that's all. That's my last thought. You go ahead and wrap us up and we'll get out of here.
Can you name a bestseller, choose your own adventure book? I don't think there is one. They may be fun. There was a time when kids loved to read it. That's great. At the end of the day, that's not where it's at. The greatest books, The Lord of the Rings, and I don't want to get fired here, but the books that everybody reads, Harry Potter, Narnia, all the books that really suck people in, it wasn't choose your own adventure. It's this is where we're going, and people go, I want to be a part of that. I want to go to Hogwarts or whatever else, right? All these weirdos. Like, I want to be part of that world. It wasn't to choose your own adventure. You don't see the choose your own adventure as a bestseller for that reason. They may have been fun for a time, but ultimately people want to be a part of something bigger. They want to be kind of led in a direction where maybe I don't have to, I can follow this and I can be a part of that. And that's what we're saying is establish that as a church, show them where we're going. Show that leadership. You don't give them a choose your own adventure. Say, this is the adventure, guys. We're going on it. This is what Christ has demanded of us, and we're all on this path together. People want that. They love it. This book sales clearly show that as well. So we hope you've enjoyed this one. Obviously leave your thoughts, comments, questions. Specifically for Deep End, we'll be recording Deep End. That'll drop on our Patreon next Wednesday, I believe. Or
Friday.
No, next Friday. Sorry. This Friday. This Friday. When we're recording this Friday. And so, make sure you get those questions in by Wednesday is what I meant to say, so we can address those or any comments or whatever else. We've been loving the comments, and we appreciate it. Fellas, anything else you want to add? All right, guys, we're going to wrap up here. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again next week.